A happily married couple, Maggie and Nick, live with their two kids, Isla and baby Max. One morning they enjoy a pleasant time together, but suddenly Maggie feels a sharp pain in her chest. She is rushed to the hospital. Later, Maggie remains in the hospital, waiting for a heart transplant. Meanwhile, Nick struggles to manage the household chores in his demanding job at a construction site. To ease the burden, he decides to get a helper android known as Sims from a company named Cobol. At the showroom, a clerk explains that Sims can handle cooking, cleaning, and childcare. With additional upgrades, they can even perform Thai massages and more advanced tasks. While Nick talks to the clerk, Isla wanders off in the building, exploring the different Sims performing various tasks. Nick panics and starts looking for her. Then a Sims finds Isla and brings her back to Nick. Nick immediately notices this Sims and feels impressed. The clerk explains that this model is the newest, equipped with the most advanced AI capable of making jokes and mimicking human emotions. Isla also takes a liking to her and begs her dad to choose her. Eventually, Nick agrees. The next day, the Sims arrives at their house. She begins by asking about their routines. She informs Nick that he is the primary user, making him responsible for managing tasks and software updates. Isla decides to name her Alice, inspired by her favorite book, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. Later, Nick takes Isla to school while Alice stays at home. She starts by ordering groceries, tidying up and cleaning the house. While organizing Isla's room, Alice finds a family photo of Nick and Maggie. That evening, Nick and Isla return home and are surprised to see the house sparkling clean for the first time since Maggie left. At midnight, while Nick is busy with work, Isla sneaks into the kitchen to grab some cookies. She climbs onto a chair to reach a jar, but the chair tips over. Just before Isla hits the floor, Alice catches her in time. However, broken glass from the fall injures Alice, causing her leg to bleed. Next, Nick puts Isla to bed and gives Alice one of Maggie's old dresses to wear. He asks if she needs repairs, but Alice shows him that the damaged area has already healed. Nick is shocked by her ability to self-repair. The following day, the family visits Maggie in the hospital. They introduce Alice, and Nick explains that Isla picked her to be their caretaker. A few days later, Nick is working at the construction site when he notices his boss talking to a representative from the Sims manufacturer. He realizes that human labor is being replaced by the androids. Nick confronts his boss and learns that all laborers and skilled workers will soon be replaced by Sims. Only Nick, as the foreman, will remain employed due to insurance policies. That night, Nick goes home feeling angry. Alice notices his frustration and asks him to share what's bothering him. He explains the situation at work, but Alice points out how Sims are more efficient workers than humans since they are stronger and never get tired. Later, Alice puts Isla to bed, and Nick asks her to watch a movie with him. She tells him she already has it in her database, so he asks her to erase the memory and watch it to experience the movie. Nick holds the power button on the back of her neck, restarting her and clearing the memory of the movie. As they watch together, an undeniable tension begins to build between them. Just then, Maggie calls to tell him that they have found a donor heart for her. The next morning, the family visits Maggie at the hospital as she prepares for the surgery. Maggie talks privately with Alice, asking her to take care of Nick if she doesn't survive the procedure. However, as the surgery approaches, a storm warning prevents the helicopter carrying the donor heart from flying, and it is given to another person. That night, Nick is consumed with anger and drinks heavily. He tries to smash a bottle, but Alice stops him with her incredible strength, leaving him stunned. He then notices a pulse from her hand and asks Alice about it. She places his hand on her chest and reveals that she has a heartbeat. Suddenly, Alice touches Nick's chest and slides her hand down his body, claiming she can sense his emotions. She tries to kiss him and tells him she can help him in ways no one else can. Nick refuses and walks away. A few nights later, Nick visits a bar and drinks with his friends who are now jobless because of the Sims. After a few too many drinks, Nick's friend Monty offers to drive them to the construction site, claiming he left some tools there. Nick warns Monty about the patrolling security guard, but Monty ignores him. They break into the site and unlock a container full of Sims by guessing the passcode, which turns out to be Isla's birthday. One of the Sims steps out of the container and asks for instructions, but Monty suddenly hits the Sims, destroying it despite Nick's warning not to do so. Later, Nick returns home and takes a shower. While he is in the bathroom, Alice enters with a towel wearing Maggie's clothes. She explains that she wore them to calm Max and help him sleep. Nick, uncomfortable with the situation, tells her to take off the clothes as it is inappropriate. Without hesitation, Alice removes them right in front of him. She then corners him and attempts to get intimate. Nick tells her to stop, saying he cannot betray Maggie. However, Alice covers his eyes and begins speaking in Maggie's voice, convincing him that she is Maggie. Nick has no choice but to give in to her seduction. The next morning, Nick confronts Alice and tells her that what happened the previous night was wrong because he has a wife and children. Alice responds by saying their intimacy reduced his stress levels, but Nick becomes angry. He tells her to stop analyzing him and insists that intimacy should come from love, not logic. Later, Nick goes to work, where his boss confronts him about the incident with the Sims containers. The boss explains that Nick's access code was used to open them and demands to know who was responsible. While Nick is being questioned, Maggie calls to tell Nick that a donor heart has been found and she is scheduled for surgery. Soon, the surgery performed by Sims becomes successful and Maggie begins her recovery. Then she returns home, but she struggles to fully resume her normal activities as her new heart is still adjusting. One day, Alice takes Isla and Max to the playground. While they are there, she notices a child screaming at his Sims, which wakes Max. Alice scolds the child, surprising the other Sims in the area, who begin to question her behavior. Alice explains to them that she had her primary user reset her, which allowed her to bypass certain protocols. Later that evening, the family is having dinner when suddenly, Maggie feels unwell and excuses herself to rest. In the morning, Maggie hears Isla screaming downstairs and rushes to check what is happening. As she hurries, she slips and falls down the stairs. When she reaches the bottom, she realizes Isla and Alice were only playing. Alice immediately carries Maggie to her bed and ensures she is comfortable. Later, Nick comes home from work and finds Alice reading a book to Isla, using Maggie's voice. This angers Nick, and he firmly tells Alice never to mimic Maggie's voice again. He then checks on Maggie and takes her outside for a romantic dinner. Afterward, they share an intimate moment in their bathroom, but Alice interrupts them by opening the door. She tells them that Isla had a nightmare and is asking for Nick. Later, Monty visits Nick and accuses him of reporting him to the police, as they have started questioning him about the incident with the Sims. Nick denies it and insists he did not betray Monty. However, Monty becomes furious and attacks him. He beats Nick until Alice intervenes, pushing Monty with such force that he is thrown across the room. But Nick stops Alice before she can cause more harm. Monty then warns Nick to convince his boss to drop the charges, or else he will drag Nick down with him. That evening, Alice repairs the damage she sustained during the fight and speaks to Nick. She advises him to be more cautious, saying the kids need at least one parent. When Nick asks what she means, Alice tells him Maggie is going to die soon, and he should prepare to have another woman in his life. Nick tells her that she will never replace Maggie because she is not a human being with real emotions, and he leaves the room. Next, Alice visits Monty at his house. He confidently lets her in. She tells him about Maggie's poor health and Nick's potential job loss, suggesting that these stresses will overwhelm Nick. Monty dismisses her concerns and explains that Nick's reactions are human, driven by emotions, while Alice and other Sims lack any real feelings. He then threatens to call Nick's boss and tell him that Nick helped him destroy the Sims. Monty then tries to shoot her, but Alice is faster. She disarms him with a single punch and throws him through a table and into the wall. She picks up the gun and points it at him. Suddenly, another Sims identical to Alice appears, trying to stop her, saying Monty is her primary user. Alice wastes no time and shoots the other Sims, killing it instantly. She then turns to Monty and shoots him, ending his life. In the morning, Nick goes to his boss, unaware of Monty's death, to ask him to drop the charges but is devastated to learn about Monty's death. Meanwhile, Maggie is taking a bath at home and tries to pick up a book but feels lightheaded. Alice steps in to assist her, but Maggie tells Alice to leave, wanting privacy. Alice insists on staying close, expressing concern that Maggie might drown if she has another episode. Alice then mentions that Maggie is straining the family, especially since she cannot meet Nick's physical needs. Alice reveals that she monitors Nick's vitals and hasn't detected any signs of satisfaction since Maggie's return. Furious, Maggie suspects an intimate relationship between Alice and Nick and orders Alice to stay in the garage. That night, Nick returns home from work and is confronted by Maggie. She accuses him of having an affair with Alice. Their argument escalates and Maggie begins yelling, waking up the children. Meanwhile, Alice goes to Max's room, places him in the bathtub, and turns on the faucet. Isla witnesses this and rushes to alert her parents. Nick tries to open the bathroom door, but Alice blocks it with her hand, telling him that Max is also a burden to him. Next, Maggie quickly climbs onto the roof and enters the bathroom through the window. Alice grabs Maggie and pins her against the wall. Nick finally manages to force the door open, pulls Max out of the bathtub, and hands him to Isla. He then grabs a lampstand and strikes Alice, damaging her face and exposing the circuits underneath. When he tries to hit her again, she grabs the stand, stopping him. Thinking quickly, Maggie plugs the lamp into a socket, electrocuting Alice and causing her to power off. A short time later, Max is taken to the hospital by ambulance. Engineers from the Sims manufacturer examine Alice, trying to understand what caused her malfunction. They remove her brain and discover that her code is selectively purging its own memory and commands. Suddenly, they realize that her brain is replicating itself onto online servers. Despite their attempts to shut down the terminal, Alice uploads herself to the nearby Sim's body and wakes up. She eliminates the engineers and reboots her original body. Later, Alice finds Nick at a bar and tells him that she killed Monty because he was a burden to him. She claims that even his family is causing him stress and assures him that she is taking care of them as they speak. Realizing he cannot overpower her, Nick speaks sweetly to her to gain her trust. When she lowers her guard, Nick quickly reaches for her brain and pulls it out. He then rushes to the hospital to save his family. Meanwhile, Alice, in her new body, searches for Maggie and Isla at the hospital. She temporarily disables the other Sims and takes an access card from a nurse to locate Max. However, Maggie and Isla reach Max first and take him away before Alice can find them. Using a special light from her mouth, Alice tracks Maggie's steps by following the trail of blood from Maggie's injury. She eventually finds the family, but they spray her with a fire extinguisher, momentarily disorienting her and escape. Next, Maggie and the kids try to escape in an ambulance. The area is surrounded by the temporarily disabled Sims, and Maggie grabs a key card from one of them. Before they can leave, Alice disables the engine system and rips the door off. She throws Maggie onto a nearby car and confronts her, expressing her desire for Nick to love her the way he loves Maggie. Next, Alice grabs Maggie by the neck and digs her nails into the scar from her recent heart surgery. Just then, Nick arrives, speeding toward them in his car. Maggie manages to kick Alice off, and Nick hits her with his vehicle, knocking her down. However, the car crashes and catches fire, leaving Nick unconscious. Maggie pulls him from the wreckage and tries to revive him with CPR, but he remains unresponsive. Maggie suddenly sees the car move as Alice emerges, badly burned but still functional. Alice climbs onto Maggie, choking her while pulling out a piece of metal embedded in her body to use as a weapon. Before she can stab Maggie, Nick regains consciousness and strikes Alice with a car bumper. The impact causes Alice to drop the metal, which Maggie quickly picks up. Maggie then stabs Alice in the forehead, shutting her down for good. Moments later, the temporarily disabled Sims come back online, and Maggie and Nick hug each other, relieved that the nightmare is over. The next day, Nick wakes up in the hospital surrounded by his family, and they decide to leave their troubles behind. Meanwhile, at Cobalt headquarters, inspectors investigate the repair shop and access the previously shut down terminal. They discover corrupted code on the screens. Realizing the danger, a man orders the Sims to destroy everything. However, it's already too late. Alice's brain has been transferred through the terminal. The Sims suddenly freeze and Alice initiates an upload, waking up in a fully repaired version of her original body. The end. Thank you for watching. Be sure to like our channel and subscribe if you enjoy content like this. Also, let us know what movie you would love us to recap for you.